My name is Camila Hart, 35 years old, living in Seattle with my husband and our daughter Ruby, a 13-year-old who loves drawing, creating, and is my whole world. We had prepared a special birthday party for Ruby and her two cousins. But right in front of dozens of guests, my mother-in-law, Vivian, suddenly handed the newest iPhones to Parker and Avery, then turned coldly to Ruby and said, "I only buy for my real grandchildren. You're not blood." Ruby burst into tears and ran off. I stood there in the stunned silence of everyone watching, looked straight at Vivian and said, "You have 24 hours to leave my house. If it were you, what would you do when your own family tried to humiliate your child?" Comment, hit like, and subscribe so we can continue this story together. Seattle, with its long drizzles in the mornings, the sound of wind slipping through the small window frame in my home office, was often the backdrop for my days hunched over the screen, designing products for freelance projects. That way I could stay close to Ruby, a 13-year-old with endless imagination, who loved turning blank sheets of paper into her own worlds through drawings and words. Mark, my husband, was a high school science teacher. Gentle and devoted, he often stayed late to help his students. He was used to carrying responsibilities, always trying to keep peace. It was a strength, but sometimes his patience made him slow to notice what was quietly eroding our family. 2 years ago, my mother-in-law, Vivian, moved in after selling her old house to cover medical debt. She said money was tight, she had no other option. We cleared out the living room, bought new curtains, set up a proper bed. I even adjusted the daily menu to fit the low-sodium diet her doctor prescribed. At that time I thought, at least Ruby will get a chance to be close to her grandmother. But from the very first dinners, favoritism showed. When Grant, Mark's half-brother, came over with his wife Sloane and their twins Parker and Avery, Vivian's eyes lit up. She bragged endlessly about their grades, awards, summer camps. Her voice brimmed with pride. Now these are children from a proper family with good manners and lineage. Meanwhile, Ruby sat quietly, sometimes shyly offering a new drawing she had finished, or wanting to share about a short story published in the school magazine. But her words were often cut off by her grandmother's laugh, or an interruption about Parker and Avery's remarkable success. I saw Ruby's eyes dim, her hand clutching her sketchbook before closing it without another word. I had brought it up with Mark more than once. "Do you notice your mother favoring them?" He sighed, "Don't overthink it. She's old, moody, that's all." I knew it was hard for him, but the lump in my chest grew heavier. My best friend Naomi, a school counselor, listened and advised, "Start writing down every incident. Not to accuse, but so when you bring it up you have clear evidence. People rarely see a pattern until it repeats on paper." I did as she said. My notebook began with a few scattered lines, then slowly filled with undeniable examples. Meanwhile, our finances were getting tighter. Even though Vivian kept saying she had no money, she contributed nothing to household expenses. Everything, groceries, utilities, medication, was on us. Mark's teacher salary wasn't much and my freelance income was unstable, leaving our budget stretched to the limit. What worried me more were the packages constantly arriving in Vivian's name at our address. At first small envelopes, but soon whole boxes. When I asked, she brushed it off, "Some things from the charity club." Then she would rush them to her room and lock the door. Many envelopes were marked in red, "Statement enclosed," clearly financial documents. Vivian had even used our address for those registrations. The more I asked, the more she dodged. "Private matters, no need for you to worry." These scattered details, the blatant favoritism, the financial burden, the secretive mail, slowly pieced into a picture. On the surface, our house was still lit, filled with clinking dishes and warm smells of dinner. But underneath, cracks had begun spreading into every corner. And I knew sooner or later it would all break apart. One late August afternoon, while I was picking string lights for Ruby's upcoming birthday party, I overheard whispers from the living room. Vivian was on the phone, her voice low and hurried. "The 2 items arrived on time. I'll bring them to the party, don't worry." I froze. From the way she lowered her voice, she clearly didn't want me to hear. But she didn't realize my office was right down the hall and the echo carried. When I stepped out, pretending to get water, she jumped and quickly ended the call. "Oh, just ordering a few things for the charity club." Her smile was forced and I caught the flicker of wariness in her eyes. I didn't say anything, but inside a ripple had begun. Ruby, meanwhile, was full of excitement about her birthday. One evening, as we picked new paint colors for her room, she sat on the bed, legs swinging, eyes shining. "Mom, when I turn 13, can I repaint my room? I want teal like the mood board I made. And, if possible, a new phone. Doesn't have to be fancy, but the old one only lasts a few hours, makes group projects hard." I brushed her hair gently, smiled. "We'll see. The room will definitely get painted. As for the phone, we'll think it through, but I understand why you need it." Ruby nestled against my shoulder, sighing in relief. My chest tightened. Her wishes were simple: basic needs to study and fit in with friends. A few days later at dinner, Ruby beamed with news. Today, the teacher picked my drawing to hang in the school lobby during art week. I was about to praise her when Vivian cut in. "Avery got accepted to a summer program in New York. That girl's got talent and luck. Not everyone gets that chance." Ruby froze, her story about the drawing left unfinished. She forced a smile, then lowered her head to pick more vegetables, as if her achievement wasn't worth mentioning. My heart ached. Another evening, I opened the family's shared email to check utility bills. Among the usual notices, I spotted messages to Vivian titled 1099 form, tax statement, and funds transfer confirmation. The words chilled me. I carried the laptop to the living room, set it on the table. "Mom, what's this? It looks like something to do with the bank." Vivian glanced up from her magazine, her tone indifferent. "Old savings interest, nothing important." She spoke quickly, then immediately changed the subject, asking about the party menu. But her eyes avoided mine, and her hand trembled slightly as she held her teacup. I didn't push further, but suspicion rooted deep inside. This woman who had complained of hardship for 2 years, living off her son and me, was receiving bank transfer notices? I told Naomi the next day when we met at a cafe near Ruby's school. She listened, frowning. "Camila, I don't want to alarm you, but every sign points to Vivian being dishonest about her finances. And if she's using your address for those transactions, you could end up in legal trouble." "I know," I sighed, "but what angers me even more is how she treats Ruby. Every time my daughter tries to share something, Vivian silences her with a comparison. Ruby works so hard to impress, yet all she gets is dismissal." Naomi looked at me, her voice firm. "That's emotional manipulation, Camila. For a sensitive child, the consequences will last a long time. You need to prepare yourself because I believe this will get worse before it ends." I stayed silent, my fingers tightening around the hot coffee cup. Naomi's words pierced the hidden fear inside me like a needle. That evening, I sat in Ruby's room, watching her spread a teal color palette across the floor, sketching out ideas for wall decorations. Her face lit up as she spoke about small details. A collage corner, wooden shelves, string lights. I smiled, but inside I felt a pounding urgency. I knew the cracks were growing more visible and one more blow could shatter everything. The next day as I came home from the store, I saw a new cardboard box outside Vivian's door. The label clearly had her name and my address. Vivian stepped out quickly, dragging the box in to avoid my eyes. "Shipment from the charity club. They sent it to the wrong address." Her voice was flat, without a hint of embarrassment. I watched her back disappear behind the shut door. In my head, the scattered pieces started to connect. The phone call about 2 items, the bank emails, the piling packages, and the open favoritism toward Ruby's cousins. Everything wound tight like a spring ready to snap. My gut told me. The truth ran deeper than what I had seen, and the day it surfaced would be the day this family could no longer pretend at peace. After that birthday party, the atmosphere in my house shifted completely. Ruby, the child who used to laugh, chattering all the way home from school, fell into a frightening silence. At night, I heard her tossing in bed, the creak of the frame as she struggled to sleep. At breakfast, she sat before her cereal, spoon lifting and falling, barely swallowing a few bites. One afternoon, I got a call from the school office. Mrs. Walker, the counselor, spoke with a firm voice. "Mrs. Hart, I need to discuss something. Ruby has been unusually withdrawn lately. She hasn't turned in her art assignments and she barely interacts with her classmates. She used to be a standout in class, but now she seems closed off. Has something happened at home?" I went still before the laptop screen, my design project half finished. The image of Ruby shrinking at the party, her muffled sobs in the bathroom, all came rushing back. I drew a long breath, forcing my voice steady. Thank you for your concern. I know what's hurting her and I will take care of it. After the call, I sat still for a long time. Lines from my notebook stabbed into my memory like knives. Vivian ignored Ruby's words. Vivian compared Ruby to Parker and Avery. Vivian hid packages. And now the result was clear. Ruby was losing her belief in her own worth. That afternoon, while gathering laundry, I found a folded receipt in Vivian's pants pocket. I opened it and felt ice water hit my chest. A purchase list from a major electronics store, reading, 2 iPhone 16 Pro Max, total $2,549.98. The purchase date was exactly 2 weeks before the party. I gripped the paper, pain stabbing my chest. This wasn't a rash decision. Vivian had planned it, spending a large sum, a sum she always swore she didn't have, to buy lavish gifts for 2 grandchildren while deliberately leaving Ruby humiliated in front of everyone. It was all staged. Leaning against the laundry room door, my hands shook. How many times had she cried poor, claiming she had nothing left after her medication, leaving us to carry the weight? Yet this receipt screamed the truth. Vivian wasn't as destitute as she claimed. Late that night, when the house was quiet, I passed through the living room and saw Vivian's oak box left ajar on the table. Inside were sealed letters. Some envelopes bore logos of charitable foundations I had never heard of. There was also a folder with bold print, storage lease agreement, Shoreline. I didn't dare dig deep, only flipped a few pages before closing it quickly. My heart pounded. Beyond the strange deliveries, Vivian was renting a storage unit in a nearby town. What was she hiding? Why was she using my address for financial correspondence? I grabbed my phone and called Naomi. I just found a receipt for iPhones, over $2,500, and a storage lease in her name. My voice shook. Camila, this is no longer about her being difficult or biased. This is deliberate manipulation. You need to set boundaries immediately or Ruby will carry the worst of it. But Mark, what happens when he's forced to choose between his mother and his daughter? That's not a choice. That's the responsibility of a father. I clutched the phone, my eyes burning. Naomi was right. That night, when Mark came home after tutoring, I waited in the living room. The yellow lamp light thickened the air. I spread my notebook across the table, each page filled with words, small events repeating over 2 years. Mark, I need you to see this clearly. I pushed the notebook toward him. This isn't a few misunderstandings. It's a pattern. He turned page after page, his face darkening. When he reached the note where I wrote, Vivian compared Ruby to Avery, saying one's a good seed, the other is different. Mark dropped his pen, burying his head in his hands. I know Mom favors them. But I didn't think it was this serious. I pulled the receipt from my pocket, placing it in front of him. This is proof. She spent over $2,500 on Parker and Avery, while Ruby was abandoned, humiliated on her birthday. Mark's face went pale. He held the paper, his hand trembling. Oh God, and there's more. My voice dropped, steady and firm. I saw the oak box in the living room. Inside were charity letters and a lease for a storage unit in Shoreline. She's hiding a lot from us. Mark looked up, eyes shaken. Are you sure? I saw it with my own eyes. Mark, you need to face the truth. Your mother isn't harmless. She has been intentionally hurting our daughter. The clock ticking on the wall. At last he exhaled, voice hoarse. I feel torn in two. He's my mother. But Ruby is our daughter. I don't know what to do. I gripped his hand, locking eyes with him. I know you love your mother. But Ruby is the future. She's losing her confidence. Do you want to watch her grow up haunted by the belief she doesn't deserve love? Mark lowered his head, his hands covering his face. For a moment, the patient, steady man I knew seemed small and lost. I didn't press further. I left the notebook and receipt on the table, then walked toward Ruby's room. She was asleep, her eyes still red. Sitting beside her, I laid my hand on her soft hair. Inside, a silent vow rose. I would not let anyone, not even family, make Ruby feel she didn't belong. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Seattle was still misty, raindrops tapping on the porch roof. I made coffee the way Vivian liked. 1 spoon of sugar, a bit of cream. I placed the cup before her as she entered the kitchen. She looked surprised. Why so gracious today, daughter-in-law? I sat across from her, voice calm but heavy as stone. I want to talk about Ruby. Do you intend to apologize to her? Vivian sipped her coffee, eyes cold. Apologize? There's nothing to apologize for. I only spoke the truth. Heat flushed my face, but my tone stayed even. Then I'll be clear. Starting today, you can't live here anymore. You have 24 hours to pack. The spoon slipped from Vivian's hand, clattering loudly against the saucer. She lifted her chin, lips tight. This is my son's house. Who gave you the right to decide? This is our house. And it's where Ruby must feel safe. I won't let you keep hurting her. Vivian's hands clenched the cup, her knuckles trembling, but she said nothing more. By noon, while Mark was teaching, I received a message. I'm coming home. We have to face Mom together. About an hour later, he walked into the kitchen, his shirt still creased from rushing. His voice low and rough. I've heard everything from Camila. I read the notebook. Mom, I can't ignore this anymore. I choose to protect Ruby. Vivian's looked at Mark, eyes blazing with shock and anger. You dare put a child, not even blood, above your own mother? Mark's hands tightened, his voice steady. I put my daughter above everything. Blood or not, Ruby is mine. And she's your granddaughter. If you can't accept that, you've cut yourself out of this family. His words slashed through the silence like a blade. Vivian shoved her chair back, storming into her room. An hour later, the front door swung open. Grant and Sloane walked in without knocking. Vivian had called them. Grant, tall in his business suit, looked at me and Mark, his tone half reproach, half superiority. What exactly are we doing here? Mom only misspoke at the party. That's no reason to throw her out of the house. I stayed calm. Not a single slip of the tongue, Grant. This has been 2 straight years. And the result is my daughter can't sleep, won't eat, and is withdrawing. Sloane folded her arms, a slight superior smile on her lips. Camila, sometimes elderly parents can be a bit strict. You should learn to be tactful instead of blowing things up. Throwing your mother-in-law out sounds lacking in compassion. Compassion means treating a child fairly. Not spending thousands of dollars on gifts for 2 kids and then humiliating the other one. If you were a mother, would you stay silent? Sloane flushed and looked away. Grant cleared his throat. Fine. Mom can stay at our place for a while. That will ease the tension. Mark nodded. That's a reasonable choice. But Mom has to leave here. Vivian came out of her room, pulling a small suitcase. She didn't look at me. She stopped in the hallway just as Ruby came home from school, backpack still heavy with books. She bent down, her voice low but firm. There are truths you'll have to face sooner or later. Ruby, startled, stepped back, glanced at her, then turned to me. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. I'm here, Ruby. Don't let those words haunt you. Vivian lifted her chin, her eyes cold, then walked straight out the door, leaving a heavy, quiet space behind. When Grant's car pulled away from the drive, I saw Mark standing motionless at the window, his arms hanging by his sides. He spoke softly, as if confessing to himself. I never thought I'd have to say those words to my mother. I stepped closer and took his hand. Sometimes protecting your child means facing a painful truth. But you did the right thing. Mark's eyes shimmered. I knew a boundary had been set. And from that moment, nothing could go back to what it was. I couldn't sleep after the day Vivian left. The last thing she said to Ruby hung over us like a shadow, haunting us both. Every time I saw my daughter hunched over her easel, her eyes far away, anger boiled up inside me. I needed to know the truth behind that oak box in the storage lease. On Saturday morning, I called Naomi. Can you come with me to Shoreline? I asked. Of course. I want to know what she's hiding too. We drove nearly 40 minutes. The storage facility sat by the highway, rows of gray roll-up doors with white numbers. I handed the clerk a photocopy of the lease I had found in the wooden box. He checked the system, nodded, and led us to a unit at the end of the row. The lock clicked open, the metal door rolled up, revealing a dim, dusty interior. A damp, musty smell hit us. Naomi switched on her phone flashlight. The first thing I saw was stacks of cardboard boxes labeled with Vivian's name and my address. I stepped closer and opened one box. Inside were statements of charitable donations, all in the name of Camila Hart. That is, me, with our Seattle address. The amounts weren't small. $5,000, $10,000, and some as high as $20,000. My hands shook as I read, my heart pounding. These donations were not made by us. Vivian had used my identity to send money to some charitable funds. This is identity misuse, Naomi whispered, frowning. If there's an audit, you could end up in legal trouble. I gripped the paper, horrified and furious at once. We kept searching through another box. I pulled out a brown leather folder stamped clearly with Hart Scholarship Fund, established 1999. My heart dropped. This was the fund created by Vivian's late ex-husband, Mr. Hart, Mark's father, before he passed away. I opened the pages. The terms were clear. All grandchildren of the Hart family, including legally adopted children, are entitled to scholarships from the fund. I touched that line, my vision blurring. Ruby, my daughter, should have been entitled to this legitimate benefit. But Vivian had insisted Ruby wasn't blood. So she had deliberately concealed the clause and robbed my child of her opportunity. Naomi rested a hand on my shoulder, her voice low. Camila, this is enough to prove Vivian intentionally excluded Ruby from the fund. I swallowed hard. In a corner of the unit sat a smooth wooden box, different from the cardboard ones. I lifted the lid and what I found inside stopped my heart. A sealed gold envelope labeled, "Give to Ruby," on her 13th birthday. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from Ruby's birth mother, sent through a law office. In it, the woman wrote that due to hardship after giving birth, she had to place Ruby for adoption. But she entrusted a keepsake, a silver bracelet engraved with Ruby's name, to the Hart family to give to her when she turned 13, so she would know she had been loved from the very first day. I sank onto the cold floor, tears streaming. This letter should have reached Ruby last week, on her birthday. But Vivian had kept it hidden all these years. She hadn't only denied Ruby, she had stripped away that sacred thread of connection. Naomi sat beside me, her voice tight with rage. This isn't favoritism anymore, Camila. This is deliberate cruelty. I held the bracelet, resolve flooding my chest. Ruby deserved the truth. We kept checking. In a plastic folder, I found cash receipts signed Sloan. The note beside them read, "Image Consulting." Naomi frowned, her eyes darkening. That means Sloan is involved too. She may have been paid to polish the image of Grant's family and the kids, keeping them shining in Vivian's eyes, and in the community. That's a clear conflict of interest. I photographed every document page by page with my phone. The mounting evidence made my head spin, but the road ahead was also coming into focus. That afternoon I met with Clara Jensen, a family attorney I trust. I showed her the photos and told her everything. Clara listened carefully, then said firmly, "The scholarship fund terms are clear. Ruby is entitled to benefits. Vivian's deliberate concealment of the letter and failure to deliver the keepsake directly harms the child's emotional and legal rights. As for donations made in your name, this could be considered identity abuse. But I advise you not to go public yet. We need more evidence so that when we confront them, no one can deny it." Clara continued, "Right now you need to protect Ruby. Don't drag her into this before she's ready. But know this. Legally, Ruby's position in the Hart family is secure. She is a legal child and the fund cannot exclude her." When I left the attorney's office, dusk had fallen. I sat in the car holding the silver bracelet to my chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of light. Vivian had tried to build a wall to keep Ruby out, but the very papers she hid had become the evidence to turn the tide. A week after the shoreline trip, I thought the darkest days were behind us. I was wrong. Rumors, once they start, spread like wildfire in a dry forest. On Monday afternoon, Ruby climbed into the car with a stricken face. She pushed her old phone into my hand, the screen still lit. On it was a screenshot from the school's parent group. An anonymous account had commented under a post celebrating Ruby's artwork displayed in the lobby. "Adorable, but too bad she isn't a real Hart. Just a kid they picked up." My insides twisted as I read. The punctuation, the cadences, the carefully cutting tone. They made me think immediately of Sloan. She worked in PR, well practiced at seeding anonymous messages that smear others without leaving a direct trace. Ruby leaned her head against the car window, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm so embarrassed, Mom. The whole class will know." I let go of the steering wheel and wrapped my arms around her. I felt her shoulders shaking. Taking a long breath, I murmured, "You have nothing to be ashamed of. I promise you, everything will be brought into the light. But I'll do it in a way that protects you first." Ruby gave a small nod, but her eyes were still clouded. That evening I called Naomi. "I'm sure the punctuation and writing style are Sloane's," I said, my voice hardening. Naomi wasn't surprised. "I thought so too. I've sent a request to the group admins to remove the post. But Camila, brace yourself. PR people like her wield rumors like sharp knives, and once they hit social media, they're hard to control." My hands trembling around a hot cup of tea. Ruby had gone to bed, but I knew sleep wouldn't come easily. The next day, Mark got a call from Grant. I heard every word on speaker. "Little brother, stop making a fuss. Mom's weak, her heart can't take it. This is all a misunderstanding." Grant's voice was sweet as sugar, but it masked blind favoritism. This time Mark didn't play the mild-mannered peacemaker. He answered curtly, his tone sharp. "Mom wasn't weak when she spent more than $2,500 on phones, and she wasn't weak when she made up stories to hurt Ruby. Don't use her health as an excuse to cover cruelty." Hearing that, my chest tightened, but I also felt something ease. Mark was finally seeing clearly. That afternoon, I went to attorney Clara Jensen's office. I handed over all the photos from the storage unit, along with printed copies of the online comments. Clara listened, her eyes sharpening each time I produced another piece of evidence. At last, she nodded decisively. "We are not going to let them control the narrative any longer. I'll draft a demand letter to Vivian at once." She laid out each point clearly. Return the keepsake that Ruby's birth mother sent, the silver bracelet and the letter, directly to Ruby. Provide written confirmation that Ruby is the lawful beneficiary of the Hart Scholarship Fund, in accordance with its terms. Immediately cease using my family's address for any financial or donation purposes. If there is non-compliance, a civil suit will be filed. Clara looked up, her voice firm. "I want her to understand this is no longer a family spat. This is a legal matter. And once the law is involved, the truth cannot be twisted by rumors or performative tears." I felt strength rise inside me. That evening when Mark came home, I told him everything. He was silent for a long time, then squeezed my hand. "I'm with you. I know this decision is hard, but Ruby needs protection." We went upstairs together to Ruby's room. She was still awake, sitting with her knees hugged to her chest, staring out the window. When I told her we had found a way to force Vivian to return the keepsake and acknowledge her rights, Ruby looked up, eyes wide. "Really? Did my birth mother leave something for me?" I gently smoothed her hair and whispered, "Yes. And you will receive it in your own hands, the way it should have been." Ruby's tears fell, but this time they were clear drops of a newly flickering hope. That night, when the house was quiet, I sat alone in my office. In front of me was the draft of the demand letter Clara would send. I read each sentence, a surge of complicated feelings rising: anger, relief, determination. I knew the real storm was still ahead. When the letter reached Vivian, she wouldn't stay silent. She would fight back, maybe by fanning the rumors, maybe with a performance about being a mistreated older mother-in-law. But this time I was ready. Because my little family deserves to live in the light, not under anyone's toxic shadow. The district art exhibition night was held at a large community center, where high ceilings were draped with white fabric reflecting warm golden lights. Even from the gate I felt the buzz. Parents, teachers, and students packed together in laughter and the click of cameras. Ruby gripped my hand, small but cold with nerves. She wore a teal dress, the color she chose for repainting her room, and the silver bracelet she had just been given. Each step seemed more careful than the last, but to me, Ruby had grown so much since that tearful birthday. Mark and I arrived early, hoping to find a quiet seat. But as soon as we stepped into the lobby, I froze. Vivian stood there in a deep purple wool coat with Grant and Sloane beside her. They walked in like a perfectly united family, holding hands, their eyes sweeping over us with a dare. Ruby lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. I squeezed her hand at once. "Don't worry, I'm here." Before the opening, while people were finding their seats, Sloane approached me. She gave a polite smile, then quietly handed me a white envelope. "You'll want to see this." I opened it. Inside were screenshots, donations from an account under the name Camila Hart, with my home address. The bold, charitable donation lines stabbed like knives, implying I had exploited charity for gain. Sloane tilted her head, her whisper soft but sharp. Before you try to smear this family, consider how far you might get dragged down yourself. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo folder from the shoreline trip and held it up to Sloane. These are originals from Vivian's storage unit. She set up every transaction and used my address. I suggest you stop playing dirty. Sloane's face flickered, though she kept a stiff smile. She turned away, but her clenched hand around the envelope betrayed her unease. Before I could exhale, an older man approached. Reeves, the administrator of the Hart Scholarship Fund, tall, thin, with silver-rimmed glasses. He shook hands with me and Mark, then spoke solemnly. I need to speak with you, Camila. We received a petition a year ago to remove Ruby from the beneficiary list. It was signed by the legal guardian within the Hart family. I went rigid, my heart dropping. Who signed it? Reeves pulled out a copy. The careful, familiar signature. Vivian Hart. Blood roared in my ears. So it wasn't just favoritism hiding the letter and the keepsake. Vivian had formally filed to strip Ruby of what was hers. Mark stared at the paper, his face draining of color. Oh God, Mom. I drew a long breath, tamping down my anger, and spoke clearly. Mr. Reeves, that petition is invalid. Here, look. I showed him a copy of the fund's terms and the letter from attorney Clara Jensen. The fund states, including grandchildren who are legally adopted. Ruby is our legal daughter, recognized by the court on the third day after her birth. Vivian abused her role and signed without authority. Reeves looked over the documents and nodded, his voice lowering. I understand. I will review this immediately. As the PA system invited guests to take their seats, I led Ruby into the hall. The room glowed, paintings hung on the walls, each with the student's name beneath. Ruby stood out, a small girl at a crossroads, 3 paths stretching in different directions. Light fell on the central figure while shadows gathered around. When the MC called her name, Ruby trembled. I held her hand and gave a small nod. She stepped onto the stage, the mic quivering in her small hand. Her voice shook at first, then grew steady. This painting is about choices in life. Sometimes we can't choose where we're born. But we can choose the path we take and the people who walk with us. Family isn't always about blood. Real family is the people who stay and love you no matter what. I saw a few parents lower their heads, eyes glistening. Mark quickly wiped at the corner of his eye. Vivian sat a few rows back, her face suddenly pale, eyes darting as her fingers twisted her shawl. She had never imagined that Ruby, the child she belittled, would stand before hundreds and speak words that left everyone silent. When Ruby bowed and stepped down, the applause swelled and rolled on. She returned to her seat, a small smile on her lips, her eyes brighter than at any moment since her birthday. I hugged her and said softly, "You did it." After the speeches, I caught Mr. Reeves in the hallway. It was quieter there, only the sound of shoes tapping on the wooden floor. I placed in his hands the photocopy of Clara Jensen's letter and the original letter from Ruby's birth mother. Mr. Reeves, these are the pieces Vivian hid. This letter shows the birth mother's intent. The silver bracelet is the keepsake for Ruby from the day she was born. And you've seen the funds clause. Ruby fully deserves to have her beneficiary status restored. Reeves opened the envelope, read carefully, his brow tightening and then easing. Finally, he nodded. I will move this into immediate review. I'm sorry this was allowed to go on for so long. I exhaled a long breath, as if a boulder had finally been lifted from my chest. When I returned to the hall, I saw Ruby laughing with her classmates, eyes sparkling. In that moment I knew, the truth, no matter how long it's buried, always finds its way back. A month after the confrontation at the cultural center, our home gradually found its calm rhythm again. No more tension ready to ignite at every meal. No more heavy sighs from Mark, nor the constant worry in Ruby's eyes. One Friday afternoon, Ruby burst into the kitchen, holding an envelope stamped by the Hart Fund. She tore it open, eyes shining. "Mom, I got it." I wiped my hands on my apron and hurried over. Inside was the official confirmation. Ruby's name was on the Hart Scholarship beneficiary list, and all her rights were restored. Enclosed was a congratulatory note stating that Ruby's piece had been nominated for the County Youth Arts Award. She threw her arms around me, squeezing so tightly I could hear her small heart thudding. I'm not excluded anymore, Mom. I'm truly recognized. I steadying my voice. You don't need anyone's recognition to have value. But I'm very glad that at last justice is on your side. Ruby's room now wore a new coat. We painted it teal together, the shade she had long chosen, covering all four walls. On the desk, she'd lined up Polaroids from the exhibition night. Friends clustered around, bright laughter, the crossroads painting at the center. Every time I stepped into the room, it felt like a quiet declaration that Ruby had emerged from the dark. In the kitchen, warm light fell across the oak dining table. The smell of the apple pie I'd just baked mingled with the soft sound of Mark flipping through his lesson plans in the living room. For the first time, our house felt truly peaceful. As for Vivian, after the day she signed the agreement, she no longer dared to appear uninvited. She moved into a senior residence of her own choosing, where she had friends her age and professional care. We agreed that any contact from her had to go through Mark or me, and that she was absolutely not to put pressure on or make negative comments to Ruby. Sometimes Vivian called. Her voice was dry, no longer commanding. Those calls were brief, limited to polite questions. I didn't stop Ruby if she wanted to listen, but I always stayed nearby, ready to end the call if it went off track. The boundaries were now clear and untouchable. One Saturday night, I set a small wooden box before Ruby. She opened it curiously. Inside was the silver bracelet with small stones and the handwritten letter. The ink faded with age. I sat beside her gently. This is the keepsake your birth mother sent, asking the Hart family to hold until you turned 13. He wrote, "You are the choice of love." Ruby held the bracelet, her hands trembling. She read the letter, each line shining straight into her heart. Then she turned and hugged me, her tears warm against my shoulder. "Mom, I belong here." I stroked her soft hair and whispered, "You've always belonged here, Ruby. From the very first day I chose you, and I'll choose you for the rest of my life." In that moment, I saw the cracks in her heart slowly knit closed. News about our family reached Grant's household too. For once, Mark's brother appeared to grasp what silence had truly cost. Grant began arranging for the kids to meet without dragging his mother along or letting Sloane interfere. Parker and Avery were awkward at first, then soon chattered with Ruby like before. Weekend meetups at the park became a habit, and for the first time Ruby felt she wasn't placed outside the cousins' circle. Sloane was different. The exposed online smears and those image consulting receipts made several of her clients turn away. Some major contracts were pulled, forcing her to post a public apology on social media, not only to me but also to Ruby and the school community. The apology was cool and PR perfect, but it left an unfixable crack in her once glossy career. One late evening, while Mark was tutoring online, I was alone in the kitchen stirring a pot of soup. Ruby sat nearby, absorbed in a new drawing. The warm light washed over us and my heart softened. Ruby looked up and smiled gently. "Mom, you know what? I think my next painting won't be a crossroads anymore. It'll be a house with its lights on." I set the spoon down and moved closer to her. "Exactly, because we finally have a real home." She nodded, eyes shining. I thought back over everything, from the insults at the birthday party, the hidden receipts, to the letters we discovered. Every wound left a scar but also gave us a chance to reset our boundaries. I realized, family isn't a bloodline chart, and it certainly isn't the imposition of people who share a last name. Real family is where we fiercely protect one another, even when we must face the deepest hurts. When we draw boundaries in the right places, a house truly becomes a home. I smiled at Ruby, her clear eyes lifted as she held up her unfinished new painting. I knew our family's journey had never been easy, but we had finally found a home that felt true. Every family has cracks and unexpected trials. But sometimes, those very cracks give us the chance to reset boundaries and learn how to love each other the right way. I believe family isn't only where we're born, it's where we're chosen, protected, and cherished. What about you? What do you think of this story? Have you ever had to stand up to protect your child, or yourself, against relatives? I truly hope you'll share your experience in the comments. Your story might give strength to someone else. If today's story resonated with you, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. In the next episodes, I'll bring you more real-life stories about love, betrayal, trust, and how we find the light again within our families. See you in the next stories.